Hi, this is SJ Munoz with Landline Media, joined today by Tilden Curl, an OOIDA board member. Tilden, thanks for stopping by and taking the time to join us today. We appreciate it.
I'm happy to be here.
All right, so anybody in the industry, truck parking, and that's all that really needs to be said. Is we the problems are vast from where you're at in Washington all the way to the East Coast and north and south and everywhere in between. So recently, you were kind of moving the direction of making some change or at least making progress and not just saying it's a problem because like I said, that's obvious. So can you kind of talk about what you've recently been doing there with a local reporter kind of rode along with you and you showed him, here's what we're looking at.
Okay.
Tilden Curl's been behind the wheel of a truck for nearly 30 years.
I plan to get as far as I can on a given day.
Driving is the work, but part of his job is also strategy. Every day he drives, he needs to spend 10 hours parked.
There's only one truck parking space for every 11 trucks on the road.
So planning is a big part of driving.
Yeah, recently I had this opportunity. There was a company that's putting out an app that will tell you how many spaces are available down the road to hopefully increase your efficiency so you'll know how far you can go, and still find parking. That, however, changes minute by minute. So the problem where parking is usually some distance away from where your delivery or your pickup needs to be the next day. And so when you're talking about the end of the last mile or the first mile, then you have to compete with all the local traffic in the mornings, getting to where you're going to unload or where you're going to reload. And so that creates a problem in and of itself with the congestion. But these metropolitan areas, they don't have parking there because of the property value. It's much more advantageous for cities to put a store there or put a building there than it is just to have flat parking for trucks. And so this one with the app, I was asked to be a part of it. And so I gave them the perspective from a truck driver, how important it is, whether you use the app or not. I don't use apps, but that being the case, it's important to know how far you can go. And I used an example of when I was on I-10 going into Los Angeles, there's billboards out there that have so many parking spaces at the rest area 10 miles ahead, and then 45 miles ahead, there's so many more. And so you can count on the odds of getting a parking space to better utilize your logbook so you can be more efficient.
Well, I mean, but also, the conversation of adding an additional, job duty where it'd be nice. And it's a capacity thing is what we're trying to kind of, maybe the message that needs to be to send out there, because I mean, millions of dollars are being spent on these apps.
Yeah.
And yes, it's great that we've gotten to the point where they're acknowledging the issue, but like you said, spaces and capacity, like that's what's needed.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I pointed that out too, that Washington is spending $2.3 million on electrifying all of this and getting this up so you can tell all up and down I-5 and across I-90 about how many parking spaces are there. But if it doesn't add a space, you've got one truck for, 11 trucks for every one space. So those spaces are going to be full anyway. And they were saying, well, the WashDOT is going to set aside a place in Pierce County for something like 50 or 60 trucks to be parked. And they said, well, will that help? And I said, well, yeah, it'll help, but we're so overwhelmed with a shortage of good parking that you're still going to have the parking problem.
Well, the key thing you said there is good parking too.
Yeah.
And safe and where, so that's part of the issue as well. And just the awareness, because like you said, the 1 in 11 stat, that's average. There's places where it's not, it's well
very much
worse.
Multiples.
Right. So, I mean, I guess this, kind of I mean, I likened it to the restroom issues you've had as truck drivers, and just getting at people. I don't think that people realize, like, unless you've worked in that, or you maybe have a family member, or you're, I think some of these lawmakers are starting to see the big problem as these, states start passing. No, Indiana's they've had some big projects announced. Pennsylvania announced, over 1,000 new parking spots on these locations. So they're getting it, but there's still, I don't think people realize that when you see a truck on the ramp, it's not because they want to park there.
Exactly.
It's because they don't have a choice.
Exactly. Yeah, and a lot of states are going, well, hey, we've got this piece of land we're not doing anything with. We'll just make truck parking out of that. Well, that's great, but if it's not close to where you're going or what would commonly be the end of your day, then what good's it going to do? Where it's located is just as important as how much of it you have.
Well, and then even outside of the, we're sticking on the awareness theme here. Even outside of the working with the local media, you've testified for state bills in the past. Is that
Yes.
correct? And just so you're kind of trying to hit every way possible just to get the word out there.
Yeah, one of the things that I promoted in Washington that unfortunately didn't get put in the final deal, but was that every time we build these new industrial areas, they should mandate a certain amount of parking for trucks that's going to be servicing that facility, and like they're just south of Seattle, there's a whole district there that's all based around industry. And so if they would take one lot out of that whole thing and reserve it for parking for trucks could come in the middle of the night, park, and when their hours are up, they can go ahead and go back to work. They can be right there. They're not a part of the traffic problem. But again, you get into this whole thing about the tax value of that property. So developers are not going to try to develop a piece of property just to park trucks on because it doesn't raise enough money, revenue for the cities. And so we need to look at the truck parking problem from a different angle. I mean, the example I used was that we have the ADA that mandates you have to have a certain amount of parking at each outlet or facility to accommodate handicapped people or people with disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And by the same token, we can use that same ideology. If all your parking is going to be dealing with trucks, or I mean, all of your business is going to be dealing with trucks, why wouldn't you provide truck parking? Safeway, they've got a whole big parking lot for everybody that comes to do business with them, but trucks are the exception.
Well, and of course, it's nice to have the amenities and all the bells and whistles, but in most cases, it's not like you're are asking for like, over the top, amenities,
No.
or, you just want a safe place that's secure and that you can feel comfortable staying for the night.
And hopefully a restroom.
Yeah, there you
know?
go. Yeah. Some small, of course
Yeah.
you want something. It can't
Yeah.
just be a piece of concrete, but it doesn't need to be, some, extravagant,
No.
development or anything like that.
No, not at all. And the states have a lot of obligation maintaining these areas, and funding from the state level to maintain these areas is something that's lacking as well, because they would rather spend the money on, for instance, bicycle paths,
Mm-hmm.
rather than spending that money and allocating to taking care of the maintaining and upgrading of these rest areas. And so, that too is a problem when you're putting the responsibility on the state to create this truck parking. They also have to maintain that. So while they may get federal grants to do these parking areas, they still have to fund from their own funds the maintenance of it.
Well, and then there's the issue it always comes up to with the paid parking services that get thrown in there, because I think those are two different conversations to me, at least. But at the same time, it's it's intertwined, because then you have some, when you bring up the lack, which it's a fact, there's not enough parking. The first one comes in, well, we have this and this and this option. But for what you would consider like a basic necessity of the job, it's kind of hard to justify in your mind spending. And especially, I mean, as much as you're on the road travel, that's a big cost on top of what you're already, having to spend for your daily expenses.
Yeah. And I pointed out to these guys too, when they're talking about truck parking, that the local guys already know where they can park.
Mhm.
They have that figured out. It's the over the road guys that say they just come in from, say, Louisiana. They don't know anything about our state,
Yeah.
unless it's a regular route for them.
Right.
And so when you have people running all 48 and possibly Canada too, then they're not going to know all the spots like the locals do. So those are the ones that you need to provide that, call it transient parking for.
Well, and that was kind of one of the last things I want to touch on. I know you don't want to keep you here too long, but just of what are, if you've come, I mean, you know your area and all that pretty well, but if someone that doesn't, is there any, tips or strategy advice? What would, cause it's hard. Everything's different. I know it's not a one size fits all thing, but is there anything that you could be like, maybe this translator or how to, help your fellow driver in any way possible?
Well, it's kind of difficult because, again, we go back to the one space for every 11 trucks. And, the more you know about where you're going, in my early days, you could look at Rand McNally and that would show where the rest areas are, things like that. There used to be a truck stop guide. Nowadays, most of that stuff's incorporated into your GPS. You can take the time, but you got to stop and do that research and make a point of where you can make it to make it fit in your schedule. Sometimes, like if you're 18 driving hours away from your next delivery, you don't need to drive 11 hours the first day and then drive 7 the second day. You can drive 9 hours the first day. If that's a good parking place, maybe it puts you on the other side of the traffic or possibly gives you time for the morning traffic to go away before you go through. And then you go on to your delivery the next day. So how you calculate your route is very important. And unfortunately, a lot of people will just take off and drive and they'll go, well, I've got to stop in the next hour, so I got to start looking. Well, that's the wrong time to start looking. You need to have that information going into each day. Do that research, and hopefully you'll be able to find sufficient parking. And the time of day is so important because truck stops, they typically fill up by 6, 7 o'clock at the latest, and even in winter when it's darker earlier, they fill up earlier than that. So what time you run your schedule on makes a tremendous amount of difference of finding parking as well.
So just those variables are just kind of, to me, underscores the importance of kind of doing what you and others at OOIDA have done, is you gotta get that word out there and kind of contact your, your local officials and things of that. And just, I mean, because just you talk about the response you've received and just things that you've seen move forward by just letting people know, as we started the conversation, they're just not aware of an issue sometimes.
That's right. And it's important that as truckers, we all weigh in. Your voice is important. I mean, I'm just a trucker, just like everybody else. But I chose to try to involve myself in some of these issues just to leave the industry a little better than what I found it. And unfortunately, I haven't accomplished that yet, but it's a work in progress. And, everybody that drives a truck should think about picking out one thing that is their go-to issue. And then contact your representatives, contact your state people, contact your local people, and just start pushing that one issue. Because the whole bathroom deal started out in Washington. I was in meetings with people. We were talking about truck parking and the issues with that. And they were talking about they called them trucker bombs that were being left behind. And I explained to them that truck drivers don't have facilities. And so what do you expect them to do when you tell them they can't drive anymore? They have to stop here. I don't approve of throwing garbage out and all that stuff. But that being said, that came out from those meetings that I went to. And I pushed the people in Washington, say, we can make a statement here that will be an example for the nation. And after Washington got on with the bathroom bill, it did go national, finally got attention in other states and finally nationally. So you never know how much of an effect you can have. Just pick out an issue and kind of make it your baby.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for joining us. Appreciate the time.
I'm happy
Thank
to,
you.
man. You
Thank
bet.
All right.